So I am in that late 20s reckoning and it has followed me into my 30s. I feel like no one really warns you about it until you get here. But it looks like for me at least, I'm afraid that I've peaked. I was very much one way and I feel like the identity around it was everything about me, or it's kind of where I sunk my teeth into in terms of like, who am I? And the example that I'm using as I've like thought about this concept is being a tomboy, which I feel like is kind of an antiquated term, but I'll talk about that more in a little bit. It could really be anything though, being an athlete or a musician, being really involved in leadership or like, I don't know, choir or something. And then you realize like maybe, I don't know, you're more than that. You've outgrown it. But then where does that leave us? So if any of that resonates with you, this video might help you. I'm someone who it's like really hard for me to settle with not being happy. That doesn't mean I don't settle at times, and I've definitely learned my lesson from that. But there's just this ball of energy inside me that's like very, very loud when something doesn't feel right, something feels off. And now, like, something does feel off, but it feels a little bit different than before. So, like, let's talk about before for a second. When you're young, your journey feels so tangible. And it makes sense because if you think about it, like in your teens, you are physically getting taller. You're getting, I guess for me, acne. I had really bad acne. You're getting acne, like there's all of these physical changes, um, as well as like internal, but the physical is so there. It's like you graduate to go to high school, then you maybe go to college, and then you graduate college, and then you get a job, and like it's this very tangible like checklist, I guess. And then all of a sudden it drops you off in your like mid 20s, and what they don't tell you is that's kind of where the journey starts. But also the emotional journey of like getting to know yourself more. And since your brain is fully finished developing, you can actually do that. But ironically, there is even less of a roadmap, both for the tangible journey and for that kind of like emotional journey. So it really does make sense why we all feel so lost. And I don't know, maybe even it makes sense why we're afraid that we've peaked, because I feel both too old. I can't believe that I'm in my 30s. I feel too old to like do anything about it. It feels like I'm so set in stone in a way, which I know isn't true. It's a fallacy, but it still feels very true. And at the same time, I feel too young to be okay with the feeling that the best time of my life is in fact behind me. So I was a tomboy. I still am in a lot of ways, but now I just feel super lost because it feels like that's not all I am. Like it doesn't accurately describe me anymore, but it's definitely kind of all I've actually known or even been okay with knowing in terms of like knowing who I am. And now I just feel super alone, not just from other people, but because I feel like I don't actually know myself. So ironically, I realized this while I was like writing my notes for this video. My blog, I had a Tumblr as a kid. I was going to pull up Facebook pictures, but we won't look at those. I had a blog as a kid on Tumblr, and the name of the blog was called A Facade, because I think that for a long time I knew that I had all these interests that maybe like didn't necessarily go together, but and so it felt like I kind of had to like wear this mask of either pretending I was not one way or pretending I was another way, when it didn't fully feel like it described me. All right. Oh, I forgot to do this. I had points, but we just went through those. So all we want is to feel good about who we are. I feel like that's just human nature. And if you're following along with your own life, like I thought a lot about my identity. Why do I identify with tomboy so much? And actually, real fast, to talk about tomboy, I said it earlier, but it is kind of like an antiquated, I feel like people don't really say it anymore. Um, but I'm kind of using it as shorthand of like not like other girls or one of the guys, or just having interests that are more traditionally male. And I also think that that line is being blurred now. Like it's not so binary in terms of like what's a boy hobby and what's a girl hobby. So I am gonna say tomboy, but I'm kind of using it as a shorthand for like not like other girls. Moving on. So, why do I identify with it so much though? And from a really early age, I kind of was dubbed a tomboy. I liked watching sports. Sports. This is a picture of my room. It clearly, like, I like sports and it was very much nurtured in my family, which is great, by the way. I don't think there's anything wrong with that. I very much played video games with my brother and my dad and my friends. This is me, that bad monkey. I got 25 kills and no deaths. Hey yo. That's a Call of Duty scoreboard. And as an aside, I ultimately actually ended up working in video games. It's weird though, because when I was younger, I would have an interest in other things maybe that didn't fall under this like very neat category of kind of like boy hobbies. And what I would do with that kind of fell into three different lanes. They were either I was interested in like more girly interests, traditionally girly interests that I did let myself like, for example, fashion, but I felt very much like a fraud because I also liked these boy things. It was like I couldn't really handle in my brain that I could like both at the same time. And that's a theme. Still working on that. And then there were these girly interests that I was pulled towards and maybe like acted like I didn't actually like it because I didn't think it was cool, or rather it was kind of presented to me as it's uncool to like the things that like other girls like. And then kind of the third lane is these girly interests that I was pulled towards and tried and maybe felt rejected, but it was like a rejection of my own doing. And then I kind of doubled down on like, I must be a tomboy and I don't really get it because like I'm not like other girls. Looking back on it though, it does make a lot of sense of how I'd end up putting so much energy into like nurturing the more tomboy parts of me because you get so much attention for it. Like, it's cool you like sports, or I can even hear the comments in the back of my head, and it's not meant, I feel like they're never meant as like malicious comments. It's literally somebody just kind of noticing something of like, oh, the girl like likes watching baseball or likes playing video games, or like that's so cool that you like to play video games. And the follow-up question is what kind of video games? And to say something with guns like Halo or Call of Duty, which by the way I genuinely love, was very cool. But it was infinitely less cool to say that I was playing The Sims or like Barbie Horse Adventures Mystery Ride, which I was playing both of those games and also loved, but I wouldn't really let on to that because I didn't get that same kind of, I guess, reaction or validation of how like unique and cool I was. Because, and I don't even think this is isolated to when you're a kid. I think that as an adult, I still very much am grappling with this, but like you so badly want to be special. You want to be special and different and at the same time want to fit in. And when you're one of the guys or not like other girls, it like exactly fits that bill because you're unique, you're not like other girls or how you'd expect me to be, but you also fit in because of that uniqueness. You become one of the guys. And it's like such a trap because there's a certain pride that you feel being dubbed one of the guys. And while I love my guy friends and like guys are great, let's be real here, ladies, my girls, we were seeking out the validation of like a bunch of kids whose voice changed over the summer and who would like steal their sister's Victoria's Secret catalogs to like flip through it. Like, what are we doing here? Now fast forward and we're adults and the world has also changed. Like I was saying, the interests and hobbies thankfully like aren't so gendered, but unfortunately for us, if you relate and you're watching this video, there's a good chance you, like me, have internalized it and even internalized maybe character traits being more feminine, which I am in the shallow depths of kind of feminine energy, masculine energy. So I'm not going to attempt to explain something that I don't fully understand, but I do feel when like my feminine energy is maybe being pulled out more than like my masculine energy. And I'm going to keep this so brief. From what I understand, like my feminine energy feels very on the surface and very outward when I'm like creating, when I'm nurturing, like cooking for someone, baking for someone, like when I'm being really thoughtful. And then my masculine energy, I feel when I'm like being very independent and like when I'm out there working and making deals. And it's not to say that, like, I think that all people have both feminine and masculine energy. But I digress. Anyways, what was I saying? Oh, that maybe we've internalized that there's certain character traits or there's certain things that are masculine or feminine, and the part that we've internalized is like the judgment on top of it of like good or bad or not for me. But maybe you simultaneously, like, you want to feel pretty and feminine and all these things, but you spent so much of your life deciding and like really clutching on to this idea, like, I am a tomboy. And that feels in conflict, but does it have to be? And so now we're going to talk about confidence, because I think confidence and like self-esteem are so important to how we present ourselves, to how we feel about ourselves, to the courage of being ourselves, like wondering, am I acceptable? And if you've spent a lot of time in kind of that tomboy zone that I'm talking about and what I've said has resonated, then like your confidence probably came from not being one of the girls. And so it does make sense now that like our internal compass is pointing to something being off, because there's so much to unpack with like gender roles and perception. And I'm not really going to get into that, but know that there is like something to go deeper here. But the more surface level of it is that when your confidence is built on the idea that you are different from other people, it is a confidence that comes from comparison. And the problem with that is that you only feel good when you're different or maybe even above other people. And I think that's kind of the subconscious philosophy of the pick me girl, because I don't think anyone sets out to like be a bitch to other people and put other people down. I think that it comes from a very deep place of insecurity where safety and acceptance and confidence and being worthy is coming from having to be the different one, the special one. And different inherently points at like there can be only be one, or at least that there's this like scarcity of how many there actually can be. And in that same lane, the confidence that you felt is likely coming from the validation of, oh, you like this thing that the boys like. That's good and very cool. Which the opposite of that statement, even if it's not explicitly said, is this implication that if you like what the girls like, that isn't very cool. That makes you normal. That makes you, and saying normal as like a bad thing. And in its more benign version, especially when you're a young kid, when you go for the like expected girly thing, if I were to grab a doll, I'm not getting the same attention as I would if I were to pick up the sticks. Um, Nobody says that. If I were to like pick up a video game controller and do like 360 no scopes, you get a different reaction. So then you grow up with this false confidence. And when I say grow up, I think we're always growing up. I'm not just talking about when we're 8 or like in high school, but I feel like I built this false confidence that pointed that I must know myself and be okay with myself. Like, I'm not lost. I'm confident. Look, I'm not like other girls. I'm not lost. But the internal confusion that started coming up when I was an adult was saying something entirely different. It was saying like, well, wait a minute, is that all I am? Like, is it okay if I'm more than that? And I said it already, but truly, I think that not accepting yourself and not making space for that is the deepest form of loneliness. So to use myself as an example, video games. I love video games still. But as you get older, as I'm sure you know, you have like less and less free time. And while I love video games, I have found myself wanting to spend my time doing other things, because I think it's natural that your hobbies and interests and what you're curious about evolves. And I did not think that this would be a big deal, but it ended up kind of being a reckoning for me. I felt a lot of pressure from myself to continue to like certain games or make time for playing games, even if I wanted to use my free time for other things. And then that really led me to reflect and ask myself, why am I making these choices? This is my free time. What am I doing here? And maybe this self-awareness came from my frontal lobe developing and a lot of journaling and therapy. But the first layer was that if you're making these choices because maybe others expect you to make them and you want other people's validation, you want to kind of play in, it feels comfortable to not rock the boat and play into what other people's perceptions of you are, especially if you feel good about yourself. Like I was saying, I felt really confident that I am the video game girl. Like I play video games. That's so quirky. And I like that identity. I feel very comfortable with that identity. It's something that I've had my entire life. So I need to continue to play video games even on the days I don't feel like doing it because I like need to keep up this facade. The second deeper layer that kind of smacked me in the face was that maybe I'm making these choices because I don't accept myself or the parts of me that wants to explore my interests outside of this identity of not being one of the girls, or rather being different. And really, the first time that I started to dive into this feeling off, but pressuring myself to play certain video games when I felt like doing other things in my free time really isn't what caused the spiral. The problem was and is that internalized judgment that I used against myself to curb my natural curiosities, interests, and just things that I was generally drawn to. So then it's the question of like, well, why don't we just do feminine things? Great question. And before all of this deep dive, and I'll get to where I'm at now after this, but have you ever done something and the entire time you're doing it, someone is just telling you that you're doing it wrong or why are you even doing it? They're just not on your side, right? And it makes it really not fun and generally uncomfortable. And so there's this deep internal conflict and just a not knowing how to get over that or how to work through that. Great example is I feel so uncomfortable being sexy, like so deeply uncomfortable. But as I've gotten older, I realized like I want to feel sexy sometimes. I want to step into that and that's okay. But to want something so inherently feminine, there's this internal conflict. So Brandon and I, we're in Hawaii and we took this picture and I like wanted to feel like I was in a bikini, whatever. And like I had an egg for some reason. And I feel like the egg turned into this weird security blanket for me of where it's like, well, no, like I'm goofy, I'm not sexy. And like that makes it okay to me. And the thing is, if at the end of the day, like you feel you don't want to like you don't want to be sexy, I'm not saying or advocating for everybody needs to want to feel sexy. But what I am advocating for is that if you have this curiosity or this urge or something that sounds good to you, that you are going after it and you're not stopping yourself because of this unresolved conflict. At the end of the day, I want for you and for me to feel comfortable in your skin and comfortable and confident in the person that you are, independent of who you're standing around, who's in the room, and if there's other women there. I want to be open-minded and not make harsh judgments about things based on internalized feedback on what's cool from when I was 8. Like that's just not helpful for anybody. So all this said, if you've had similar experiences to what I'm saying, there is nothing wrong with you. There's nothing wrong with me. I've spent this whole video critiquing and in a way, I don't want to say blaming, and I hope it doesn't come off that way, but clinging tightly to this identity has gotten to a point where I can clearly identify that it is holding me back. It is creating a very lonely, sad version of myself. But at one point, it served you. It served me. It was helpful. We found friends and hopefully like meaningful relationships. You explored things that you were genuinely interested in. And in my case, video games was a huge thing. Sports, huge thing. Met really great people. I ended up working in video games and sports, and I love it. So I wouldn't say that I've even outgrown it. Like I'm not interested in it, or that at the end of the day, like I never really actually liked it. And if that's your situation, that's also okay. But I do think that for me, it's more about making space for the other parts of ourselves and also choosing those parts of ourselves. Because what we don't want is to swing to the other extreme where it's, I was a tomboy and now I only like these new feminine things, and having, those more like, not like other girl interests is bad. Like labeling any of it as bad, unless it's, I guess, a harmful interest is bad. It's not helpful. And I think there is something to be said about there are days when I feel more soft and nurturing, and I wish I knew how to like knit a sweater or something. And then there's other days where I want to like sit down and play Call of Duty. And the beauty is you can do both. And honestly, sometimes it's an hour to hour thing, or even just the energy in a room. And my goal is being able to do both, feel comfortable in both spaces, and make space for for both of those energies. And you need to not judge whatever shows up and instead replace it with curiosity and openness. Like if you take anything from this video, it's that line is you just need to let yourself be here. What I've learned so far is that you really can only go as deep with other people as you're willing to go with yourself. And if you're afraid or judgmental around the other parts of you that aren't a tomboy or, you know, whatever that like sticky identifier you have, it's cutting a lot off from you and it's suffocating the parts of you that don't fit into this very narrow lens. And that's sad. And it's setting us all up for failure. So we're not going to do that anymore. So we admit that we've lost ourselves. Now what? When you feel really disconnected from even understanding what do you want, what sounds fun, what sounds interesting, like if you can't answer those questions for yourself, I try to start with very tangible things. So and sometimes, you know, it's like 3 steps forward, 2 steps back, or whatever the saying is. Some days I can really connect with what sounds fun and interesting to me. And other days I'm being so judgmental towards it that it's hard for my internal self, my inner child or whatever, to be honest with myself. And so in those days or in those moments, tangible things. Second, I feel the urge to go to the bathroom, I will. I will not put it off. I'm not going to finish sending this email. I just listen. I respond to the needs of my body. Same thing if I'm thirsty. I notice it. I immediately go get water. If I'm hungry, same thing. And then other urges start to kind of feel louder or I can hear them better. So maybe it's wanting to feel the sun on my skin or go for a walk. And then I honor that the best that I'm able to. And sometimes there's bigger curiosities that I just don't have time to do immediately. It doesn't mean you hate yourself or this whole process is doomed, but what do we do about that? So for me, one of them is oil painting. I just got that off Facebook Marketplace. And I texted myself, I can't just like stop everything I'm doing and suddenly learn how to oil paint. So instead, I made a commitment that every week I'm going to do one thing that gets me closer to actually oil painting. So last week it was watching a YouTube about everything that I need to start oil painting. I watched it, I got it. This week I ordered this stuff and then next week, hopefully I'll paint something. And the other thing to accept is that like, it will be uncomfortable. As much as you try not to judge yourself, you will. Also, it's getting really hot in this room. You can probably tell I'm getting so sweaty. But the more that you judge yourself, the less fun that you're going to have while you try to figure out who is this whole version of yourself. And I guess really try to remember that. And when you don't judge yourself and you kind of are able to break through and enjoy maybe a new hobby or try a new thing, really notice it, really pat yourself on the back. And then when I do judge myself, I ask myself where it's coming from. I try not to meet it with frustration, even if it is frustrating. I try to be curious instead and ask why, what's going on? Why am I so judgy about this? And usually it's fear, fun. It's fear to be seen. I'm afraid to be seen beyond this moniker of being like the video game girl. And then asking myself what would happen if I were to be seen as who I am. And then my thought path usually ends up that I'm afraid that I won't be accepted or people won't like me or I'll be found out as a fraud. Then if I'm found out as a fraud, then that means that like I won't be worthy. And like that does hurt. It is deep. It is scary. But when I really sit with myself and ask myself like, is this true? It never is. If you told my younger self that being a tomboy or not being like other girls was actually going to make me really lonely, I think deep down, maybe I know that there was something there, just because I did have these instances of, I remember wanting to play dolls really bad with my neighbor and she had an older brother and I became like I think him and his friend made a comment about like cutting all of the Barbie's hair off or something. And suddenly I was like, oh, I don't like Barbies anymore. Like we need to like, destroy them. I thought it was really cool and edgy to destroy the Barbies, even though deep down I like actually wanted to play Barbies. But so my comfort and my confidence came from being like counter girly. And because it gave me so much confidence and it was so cool to be tough and independent and different, I don't know if I'd believe you. But I do now see that it's cutting us all off from knowing ourselves. And that is the most painful, excruciating type of loneliness. So we accept it. we say it makes sense that we have this tendency. It served us at one point, like it got us friends. We were doing things that we were interested in, but maybe we over indexed a little bit. And I think we can be both. I think that we can like video games and fashion and sports and cooking for your boyfriend and being able to take care of ourselves while also liking being taken care of and even letting someone else take care of you. That's can be a video in and of itself, but I think falls under the kind of that comfort of being in a more feminine energy state. I did do a video where I tried some hobbies that I have always secretly been interested in, but was too intimidated to actually try because they weren't like tomboy hobbies. It would make me like other girls to try them. So if you're interested, I think you'd like that video, and maybe I'll do more of these. Bye.